Welcome to this roundtable on Strat News Global. I'm your host, Ramananda Sengupta. Today's roundtable is the first of a series we are planning on what we can expect from India and the US in terms of trade and technology in both civilian and military domains under President Trump's second term at the White House. Joining me today, on my right, we have Mr. Sanjay Kumar, a former senior director of the US CHIPS Program Office, who has also held senior leadership roles at tech majors like Meta, Intel, Broadcom, and NXP. On his right, we have Lieutenant General Raj Shukla, former Army commander of the Army Training Command and a UPSC member. He's a highly decorated soldier who has been consistently championing the need to develop indigenous high-tech in the military domain. And facing me is Mr. Jaijit Bhattacharya, a globally renowned expert in technology-driven governance and societal transformation, and the founder-president for the Center for Digital Economy Policy Research, and has several best-selling books on e-governance and technology. I hope I got that part right. Okay. So let me start with Mr. Bhattacharya. Mr. Bhattacharya, if we've been talking about technology collaboration with the US for a long, long time now. Under Trump, what would you say are the main sort of, I won't say challenges, but expectations that India has, and how valid are those expectations?
I think India always wanted the world from US because clearly US still is a leader in technology, right? And so we would like to have a whole bunch of technologies, from military technologies to semiconductor to pharmaceutical and so on and so forth. But I think the point is, what is US comfortable with under the new Trump administration? And so we need to look at what Trump has said till now. Clearly he's talked about America first, which means that he wants to have the jobs in US. And as a politician, that's what his KRA is, to make, have more jobs, and therefore he gets more votes in a democratic setup. To have more jobs, he needs to have more manufacturing, more services, and technology is a key enabler in that, right? So that's the bottom line that we start with. So if it's left to him, as per his policies, he would not like to let go of any technology to US, to India or anywhere else. And for that matter, he's turned around against his allies in Europe and elsewhere, in North America, in Canada. He's turned against his allies because he wants to bring back both the capital and the technologies into US. But having said that, India is not like any other ally. India is probably the best friend of US in this part of the world. And this part of the world is critical for US. Indo-Pacific is a critical area for US. Quad has been formed in order to take care of some of the geopolitical challenges coming out of the Indo-Pacific. And therefore, the geoeconomics surrounding India becomes quite important. For that to be enabled, sharing technology becomes important. Now, what kind of technology is the question? Is he going to give us everything on, let's say, semiconductors? Because I see him being an expert, so I'll keep taking that as an example. Well, they won't, because the stated goal is for US to be in the cutting edge of semiconductors, be it against China or be it against anyone else. And India falls in that second category of anyone else. And the US has not really differentiated between friends and foes. India, fortunately, at this time of the season, falls under the friends category, because transactionally it's important that India is aligned to US from a US perspective. So they are trying their best for that to happen. So there will be technologies that will be shared, that there will be ecosystems that will be enabled within India, semiconductors being a great example, pharmaceuticals being another example. If you look at US, just like the rest of the world, it's APIs and KSMs, KSMs is key starting materials in pharmaceutical, it's active product ingredients in pharmaceuticals. Most of them come from China. So tomorrow, if there is a strategic situation, then all that China has to do is cut off the supply of these KSMs and APIs, and the health of the US will come down to its knees. And so you don't need to really fire a shot. You can bring down the US population by just doing that. And therefore, supply chain resilience becomes critical. India plays a very important role in that supply chain resilience. Unfortunately, if I look at pharmaceuticals itself, India itself is dependent on China. So the point is for US and India and the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework to work towards an arrangement and an ecosystem wherein the supply chain starts falling into these trusted entities as well. There's no such word as trusted entities, so I'm cooking it up as I say, but trusted from a US perspective. So I think every conversation we're having, it's more from a US perspective than what India needs. Now, therefore, what starts getting hit for India is H-1B visas. Out of the total of roughly 900 billion trade that we do, half of it is in services. A bulk of that is with US. Now, and a bulk of that again is based on H-1B visas. Obviously, we have the global the capability centers coming up in India in a big way, but still sending people over to the shores of US and doing development, and that being part of the GNP of India is a critical part of India's economy. With compromises coming out in issuing the H-1B visas, which is important for people to go to US and do the development, it will have a significant impact on India, both in terms of economic impact as well as technological impact, because if you're not exposed to the cutting edge of what's happening in US, you can't come back and replicate it. So just like what happened in World War I and World War II, we had great exposure. Large population of India went to Europe, fought there, fought the battles, got a lot of exposure. They came back, and that helped change the society over here, and eventually led to the British also leaving. So that exchange is important, and that might get threatened under the current administration. So there are pros and there are cons, and we have heard mutterings around the cutting edge F-35 to be given, and General Shukla will be able to talk more deeply on that aspect. But from a tech perspective, the fact that he's even muttering such technologies which are supposed to be cutting edge to be given to India, I think that's a phenomenal change that has happened. So I hope that continues, but we need to keep in mind that there will be a check and balance, because it will always be America first.
Of course. So we'll be back after a very small break. Let me come to you, General Shukla, that, when Prime Minister Modi went to the US just some time back, and there was a lot of discussion on, particularly defense. We had something that compact, and it's a long acronym and stuff
compact,
like that.
Trust, Asia, lovely
So
sounding.
there's a whole bunch of those. As a, military man, how confident are you that most of these things will come through? And what do you think America is expecting from us?
So before I come to the defense piece, if I may just make 2 points on the larger Trump phenomena. I do not think Trump is this outlandish maverick who just one day comes to the platform and makes a statement. For example, when he says, let's cleanse Gaza, he's making that statement. But the MAGA movement has got some very serious policy wonks who have investigated this issue for years. For example, Gaza, his son-in-law Jared Kushner fleshed it out in a Cairo university 2 years back, and I just discovered this. So we must take Trump seriously, but not literally, because there is a whole lot of policy investigation, the America First Policy Institute, Project 2025, these issues have been deeply thought through. So, I would urge that we don't make that fundamental mistake that he's an outlandish maverick, though he speaks in that manner. But he's got, and let me tell you how deep this thought is. Jaijit was talking about H-1B. For H-1B, follow not Elon Musk, but Steve Bannon, his close confidant, who makes this point, and I was astonished to hear this. He says, but the president talks well of H-1B, Musk thinks it's good, I think it's horrendous, it must go, and look at the argument he's giving. He says this myth that has been spread that superior Indian talent is coming and replacing inferior American talent is a lie. The companies in America have propounded it so as to depress costs. Now, I don't know how true it is, but this is how these things are being challenged. So the point with the Trump presidency is that he is going to be extremely transactional. There will not be one, policy pathway. They will keep evolving, and we have to be prepared for all kinds of stuff. Now, coming to that defense space, in the context of the Prime Minister's visit to USA and France, so I look at it this way, that there is one grim reality, but two great opportunities. Now, what is the grim reality? Is India's very adverse strategic environment. I mean, very quickly, if you look at China, it is this 400-ship navy, J-36, million swarming of drones, 5G, it's, just fantastic. The J-36 is going to be inducted by 2032, when the Americans are going to induct their NGAD, the next generation air dominance platform, only in 2037. That's the way China is going. Now, to service or to attend to this grim reality, the two opportunities are: one, in the Trump administration, and here I would say, put it this way, there is a possibility that Trump will be very conditional and erratic. For example, we already know these G engines are not coming to the Tejas. Now, that is not innocent stuff. Though that kind of hardball Trump will only grow. For example, when it comes to defense sales, will he want those companies to come up in USA or in our defense corridors? We would want them to come up here. So these kind of things will have to be negotiated with him. The hope lies, if you go to his policy teams, if you follow Elbridge Colby, which could be the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy or something, he has been making this point for long, before Trump threw Europe under the bus, that we are fed up of these pathetic dependencies like Europe, who don't spend on defense. We value partners like India, autonomous strategic partners which stand up to the Chinese. Now, there is the hope, if that is serious policy, Trump. And if they value us, if they value the strategic relationship, then they would like a technologically enabled American military, because it would be in their interest. So I would say it's early days, pretty complicated. The other hope I see is that the Biden administration was, we want this to be done, but policy or yay. I think the Trump team will be more doers, pushers in kinds of delivery. So, that may be the hope. If I may just make one more point. So there is a reality and there is the opportunity. The other opportunities in India, if the Prime Minister and the Raksha Mantri have said that 2025 is the year of the defense reforms, these opportunities, all this compact trust in Asia will not get leveraged unless defense reforms in India deepen. Our old sluggish bureaucracy, our old attitude to the private sector, this thing with US, that has to change. Because these are very ambitious stuff, compact, trust, Asia. So our bureaucracy will have to step up the game to align with those opportunities. So I think by opening remarks, I will just say this, that Trump could be erratic, irrational, but his policy team says India is a autonomous partner. Now, I'm not saying we should be innocent. We should see how it goes along, but there are opportunities. And see, when we say the common understanding in India is that, Russia and France are our steadfast allies. In some ways, yes. In some ways, not. As I was talking offline, the Chinese military, its, upgradation has been enabled greatly by Russia. So it is direct interest. It is not that because India is a friend, they don't do that. In that context, the Americans have not been bad. We have take the C-130, C-17, Chinooks, Harpoons. We are greatly dependent on the Americans. So while we should not worship them and not trust them, I think we should try and be as smart as Trump will be smart with us. We have to see how it goes. And if I make just two more points, there is opportunity in this relationship. I was talking of a defense startup called Bharat Semi in semiconductors, and it is not only in defense, it is defense, green energy, next generation communications. They have got an order from the US Space Command on merit. So I'm not begging, I'm saying that there is enough talent in India if we can get it up. Why should US Space Command give this startup an order? So there is that talent piece also. And if I may make just one point, we have many startups in India which have matured thanks to Atmanirbharta in defense and IDEX, Agni, Kul, Bharat Semi, New Space. वो कहाँ stuck हैं? They are stuck in the sense that they had just got the first set of orders. If we give them more and more orders, make them commercially viable, enable them to stand up on their own feet, if they become good, powerful startups, what have become national champions elsewhere, why will the Americans not want them? So we must grow our own startups. Now our system is such that वो अपने startups को आसानी से grow नहीं करने देता. So while we can keep blaming the Americans, of course they are smart, they will look at their interest. We have to set a lot of things in our thing. And if some of these things get cracking, maybe the Indo-US relationship will not be too bad. I'm not hopelessly optimistic, but I'm cautiously optimistic.
But, you know, your statements did open up a whole bunch of questions, but I'll come back to you later on that. Mr. Kumar, you know, you're almost like an ultimate authority on this CHIPS program and all this kind of stuff because you work very deeply and all that. I'd be very curious that, you know, in India, all the major chip makers and everybody else, the Americans, top 10 American people already have offices in India. India is designing a whole bunch of chips, but we're not making it. Why is that? Where is the gap?
No, I'm pleased to be here and honored to be with this panel. In India, your question is, I think, very top right now, timely in terms of the manufacturing, CHIPS Act, PLI, and Korea having their own $100 billion investment. So all the countries are making the investment, but the design and manufacture, these are two different parts of the value chain of the semiconductor. So historically, the design side has come up because India has a lot of talent in terms of engineers we graduate who know how to design, and design is done in, you know, coding, for example, and Indian talent is really good at that, and the multinationals took advantage of that and they set up the office here. So we are designing, Indian engineers are designing the best processors in the world, the networking chips and everything. So TI, Intel, Broadcom, Marvell, Qualcomm, all these companies have offices here and the products are being designed here. But manufacturing, there are three or four axes we can look how a manufacturing sector comes up. So one is the demand. Even though design is being done here, but the biggest market for the chips is US customers. So those are the ones that buy. But they get assembled in Far East. So it used to be in China and still is in China and Taiwan. That region is assembling it. India is designing it and then America is consuming it. So the purse string is in America. So that's where the manufacturing decisions are being made, where to source. So so in terms of the assembly, so the China buys a lot of chips, but they get shipped over to US. So, and China has been very, I think, aggressive in terms of the manufacturing incentives, in terms of building up the infrastructure. So the second point is the infrastructure. To design, you need a building, you need, you know, computers, but to manufacture, infrastructure is required. That's availability of the power, that is the road, that is chemicals, gases, transportation. So you need infrastructure, and China was really good at, and Taiwan was really good at providing the infrastructure and clean water, clean power. Third is the talent. So the manufacturing, you need a very specialized talent, mostly around device physics. So you really need PhDs. So this is very, very deep tech, and that talent, we have a lot of talent in terms of, you know, the coding, design, but manufacturing, which is very, very deep tech and hard tech, we don't have enough graduates. And this is not the problem with India also. This is a problem with US also. US doesn't have enough engineers, deep tech engineers to manufacture. So there is a talent shortage around the world, people who can manufacture and manufacture at profitability, right? So fourth is in terms of the government incentives. So we are seeing TSMC now, you know, it's you know, probably the most advanced company when it comes to the manufacturing, but Taiwanese government was very proactive in terms of providing the land, the incentives, and billions have gone into the TSMC to bring up the TSMC. and the world is taking notice of that now and trying to level play the field. So those governments saw this, and Singaporean government also saw this. They were very proactive. The Economic Development Board at Singapore, they were very proactive in terms of this. So these things help to establish the manufacturing in Taiwan, in Singapore, in China. And I think there was probably also a matter of luck also. I think India was on its way with the semiconductor complex, and there was some fire or something that happened, and maybe that was also part of it. But the demand is 60% of the world's demand for the advanced chips is in US. There the product companies are here. We are designing. We do not have our own product companies. We are starting with assembly. We are starting with packaging, and now we are getting into 28 nanometer manufacturing. But to fill those 28 nanometer manufacturing plant which are produced by Tata and others, we need our companies to put order there. The other companies in the European companies and customers, I think they have enough choices and they need some incentive to bring their demand over here to fill this factory. And either it is the cost or either it is the superior product that we are going to manufacture over here. And those things are going to take time. And I think even with the expansion that we are doing, whether it is in the logic or power semiconductor, I think we need to generate demand. It's not, I think, prudent to rely on external customer, external company coming in and filling these fabs. So we need incentives on the product companies. And finally, it's also another thing is the venture capital is also plays a role in it, not in manufacturing, but in terms of the US ecosystem is very unique, that the venture capital, they put money in the deep tech which have maybe 10% chances of succeeding. Indian investors do not invest in that kind of things. So those startups that are funded by the venture capital, they come up with the innovation and they get acquired by the large companies, and as large companies starts to manufacture, they take that technology. That ecosystem of university and the ecosystem of the investors is very unique to US. Most of the world, whether it's Europe or India, is not that different. The investors are very cautious in terms of allocating the capital. They would rather have less returns than take the risk of putting money into a new technology, developing the new technology. So, and over there, I think the venture capital, they have become comfortable in putting the money in those types of things. So you will put money in 10 companies, probably one will succeed, and that will cover the losses of the 9. And rest of the world hasn't caught up to that type of thing, and that has brought up that this a lot of innovation there and the demand for the manufacturing.
But what kind of sort of time frame are you looking at for, let's say, India to actually start manufacturing? If you can give me a ballpark time.
Yeah.
5 years, 10 years?
I think it takes about 2 years to, first of all, put something on the ground, the infrastructure, the plant, the clean room and everything. So it's a 2-year timeline just to bring up the factory. Then about a 1-year timeline for customers to come in and start testing it out, qualifying it. So we are looking at, if we just go by the schedule, it's a 4 to 5 year timeline that we should be able to start manufacturing probably sooner. It depends on the volume. So we'll maybe have the test volume
we
sooner.
Can scale up the volume, but I was just saying that once you start, I mean, you need to have.
I think so we can scale up the volume once you start. So 2.5 years of the construction time, 1 year to get the line going and so forth. So we're looking at if everything goes well, around 4-year time frame to start manufacturing.
5 years approximately, 5-6 years. With our bureaucracy, as you said, we might have to add to that. Dr. Bhattacharya, I have a question for you, which is that you mentioned that Trump will probably be able to make things move much better than Biden did, because even though, I mean, he can just tell people that you do it and people will do it. But given that most of the tech companies in the US are in the private sector, which have their own dynamics, how difficult will it be for Trump to convince them to, give us their technology, which they've spent so much money on developing and building together, is that going to be a problem?
No, absolutely yes, because at no point in time will the US government, under any circumstances, tell its private corporates to part with their technology. That's not in the framework of US. It's free entrepreneurship, free from the government. What the government can lean on is certain policies and so on. For example, DEI is a great example. Trump said no DEI, and most of the tech companies have dumped DEI, which is diversity inclusion policy. So the government can lean on that, but not on technology. A technology for a tech company is like the factory, because you don't make any material factory. That is the factory. So you can't snatch away the factory and give it to somebody else. It's not in the interest of that country. Neither is it in the interest of the companies. If the companies stop making money, there'll be less taxes and there'll be less jobs. How does it help them, right? So therefore, the hidden question that you're asking is that how does technology transfer happen between US and India, right? So let's say we talk about F-35, where there are murmurs that along with that offer, there may be technology transfer, which means Lockheed Martin or any of the defense companies have to be involved. It has to be deeply thought through, and especially in military technologies, because it has got repercussions on both sides, as the general was mentioning. So technology transfer will happen when the US government gives a nod on what they have classified as sensitive technologies. It will then permit the American private companies to transfer technologies if they so choose to. So what the US government will not do is invoke the CFIUS. CFIUS is an act which allows the US government to step in and stop technologies from being given, or companies which hold sensitive technologies from being acquired by foreign powers. So what this whole technology transfer essentially means is that the US government will not give a roadblock or not block the transfer of the technology if the private sector so chooses to. Now in this world, obviously everything is for sale. So typically the fourth largest economy in the world, and we should be fourth largest in any time now, should be able to have the buying power to go and buy in the technologies. So that's how technology transfer will happen, because nobody is going to give it free on a platter, unless we go the China way, which is steal the technology. So since we are not going the China way, we have to pay. Now the only hindrance to that is the US government stepping in with the regulation saying, no, even if you pay, we cannot give you the technology. For example, again, military weapons. We would like to buy many of them, right? But they don't offer it. It's not for sale. Similarly, technology transfer is not on the table. Once they allow it to be on the table, then the market forces take over. So that's how the technology transfer will happen.
That clears up a lot. It actually put things into perspective. General Shukla, let me ask you a slightly speculative question. There is talk that Trump might join Putin and Xi Jinping in Moscow on May 9th, their Victory Day, which would be a sort of incredible thing to have all three of them in one platform. If that happens, if at all, how does our strategic relationship change with the US or with Russia, for instance?
Now see, what you are now alluding to is another dramatic possibility in geopolitics, but with Trump you cannot rule it out. And maybe you are seeing the early signs of it in Europe, where what has he done? I suppose there is this parallel imagination where Trump is saying his MAGA team has decided that it is not worth taking on the Chinese in the strategic military space because they have become simply too powerful. I'll give you an example. Just take a minute or so. Look at how the military dynamic has changed in the first island chain. 1950, Mao is waiting to wade across the strait and get to Taiwan. The Americans send in their 7th Fleet. 58, it repeats. This time they threaten nuclear weapons. 1995, Bill Clinton sends 2 aircraft carriers. Then the Chinese say enough is enough, A2AD, and they build that whole sophisticated system of long-range precision rocket force. What is the reality today? The American IPACOM commander, Admiral Paparo, says our aircraft carriers will not enter the first island chain. From threatening, they cannot. What does he offer now? Hellscape. What is Hellscape? Autonomous systems. What is the geopolitical outcome of this? The geopolitical outcome is now Chinese are saying in conversations, listen, now this is not the same China, retreat to your corner of the Pacific and let's carve up the world. I believe that was something which Xi told Biden, not last year but the year before last. And therefore there is this possibility, a possibility that a very transactional Trump will say, all right, trade tariffs, we'll battle it with the Chinese, strategic military we cannot, so retreat to your corner of the Western Hemisphere, and now you have three ecospheres where, for very valid, realistic reasons, he says China led Asia, Russia led Europe, and an American led Western Hemisphere. This is transactional Trump. Now that changes the equation greatly, because that now leaves India to battle with China on its own. So we have to revisit the parameters of our strategic autonomy. Now that's a very different space. But I will not rule it out, because what you are suggesting, this I have read many of his policy experts articulate this. This is what makes Trump such a difficult beast. You cannot predict him. And from his point of view, it's entirely transactional. So at this point, it does not seem likely, because the other policy team does say that, you know, we want to end the war in Ukraine, end it in West Asia, so that we can pivot to Indo-Pacific. But see, what is he doing? West Asia, he's growing the dynamic. The Riviera, Gaza, Saudi Arabia, Israel. So, I mean, that is why I go back to my initial statement. He's not an outlandish maverick. There is deep thought. So our handling of the Americans will have to smarten up by an order of magnitude. We can't have the old sluggish ways. So, I mean, I won't rule it out, but it is absolutely possible that there are these three ecospheres. And usko to India se koi khas mohabbat hai nahi. He will say, bhai, now deal with China on your own.
But do you think, India now needs to factor in the possibility of this happening, and then?
I mean, yes, how can you rule it out?
It's a possibility.
It is a possibility. The other possibility, when my opening remarks, I pointed to some opportunities, that is a possibility. But there is this black swan possibility too. With Trump, you can't say.
Mr. Kumar, before we come to our last question, because we are running out of time, I was just thinking that, in your experience, from the US side, when it comes to things like technology and whatever else that you may have, how has the perception changed in the US vis-a-vis India? Because, it's been going on for some time. There was a time when, we had issues because of the Cold War, when we didn't have anything. And there has been a change in perception. Now we are strategic partners doing a whole bunch of stuff. But is there still some kind of maybe a mental blockade in some Cold War mentality or something still prevalent?
I mean, I won't say that I know that deeply, but I think one thing is the framework in terms of the technology transfer. I mean, why it is important, as other panelists has pointed out, the technology fuels the productivity gains, technology fuels the economical gain, technology gives superiority in the battlefield, and the medicines and all the advances are enabled by the technology, and this is the currency of the influence, is the geopolitics of the technology. That technology is it gives you geopolitical influence around the world. So that's the framework I think any government looks at when they do the technology transfer. They look at the technology transfer from this framework. But with this with the importance of the semiconductor, so semiconductor value chain is pretty long. There are thousands of companies involved in this semiconductor value chain, from chemicals to assembly to manufacture to design and so forth. And all the governments, they are putting a lot of money into it. US has put in like $52 billion, Europe did the same amount, and China is saying $100 billion. So everybody is trying to build the semiconductor ecosystem in their part of the world, but it's not possible because it takes trillions of dollars, not billions of dollars, to build the whole semiconductor ecosystem in one part of the world, and I don't think it's going to be it's going to take some times, and that's where you will see this technology transfer. I read somewhere that DARPA, a US defense agency, is making a technology transfer to manufacture the chips here in India. So that's complementary. So when we look at a very, very advanced technology that is being done in the US, and then we need to, for example, package the chips, assemble the chips. That, for example, is done in India, can be done in India. So that can be built in India. Similarly, downstream components, supply chain. So if the governments are coordinating, and the governments have been very, coordinating in terms of implementing their own version of the CHIPS Act, and they are allocating the capital smartly, that we bring up, China plus one type of ecosystem. So still the world is reliant on, for example, in China for minerals, which goes into the chip production. There is no alternative. But when it comes to the tools, the most advanced tools are coming from Japan and Europe. And when it comes to the manufacturing technology, Taiwan, and then we can come into another downstream components that can be in India. So that's where we have seen this technology transfer coming from DARPA, and both administration have been very on the friendly terms in the last under President Biden and Secretary Gina Raimondo, on whose team I worked in. And so we looked at the opportunities what India can do that will complement the efforts in Europe, in US and other parts of the world. So the mindset shift, I think it is changed, that we are transferring the MEMS and sensor technology to India. So there is a mindset shift change to have this alternative supply chain in the world.
We've almost run out of time, so let me end with a quick question to all three of you in the same thing. I'd like you to sort of tell me that, when we look at India-US tech and trade relations, do you see it as a more or less positive thing, or do you think it's a wait and watch kind of a thing, or do you think that, we should be very careful about how we deal with the whole thing? And if you could just, qualify your answer with maybe one sentence explaining why.
I think clearly when there's a $500 billion target by 2030, so clearly it's in the upswing. And both leaders, which is Prime Minister Modi and President Trump, has both agreed to it. It's 4 times the size of the current trade, so clearly it's going to be in the uptick. Now, what will be the nature and composition is something we need to be watchful about. Who gains out of it, we need to be watchful about, but it's going to be in a positive trajectory overall.
That's good to hear, sir.
I'd just like to say one thing, taking off from what Sanjay was saying. See, the time has come now to take the technology bull by the horns, because technology is driving geopolitics and national security like never before. He was mentioning chips. Chips goes into everything from drones to hypersonics. Russia would not have been able to resurge in the conflict were it not for 200% support on chips from China. So we have, at one time we used to look at steel, aluminum. Today you have to look at your stockpiles of chips, quantum. So this dramatic change has to be made. And here, if you permit me just one moment, see, there are serious problems. Look at, after Atmanirbharta and defense, we suddenly had this drone defense company sprouting, 300 of them. Good news, but the tragedy is, out of the 12 components in the drone ecosystem, 11 are imported, and what is worse, all 11 are from China. So what Atmanirbharta? So we have to get really serious, and here the point is, that despite the highest number of STEM graduates, in the business technology spectrum, India is operating at the lowest end. I think Sanjay made this point. So we are simply aggregating. Our PSUs are aggregating other people's IPs. So we have to now hold to account our IITs, our universities, कि भाई आपके जो graduates हैं, वो deep technology में क्यों नहीं जा रहे हैं? IITians, why are they going for these pizza apps? Because China has worked on civil military fusion. जो वहाँ technology लगती है, वो military space पे भी नहीं लगती है. If we don't tackle these fundamentals, and see what is going to happen. He was talking of Indians designing the chip, it going into an American product, and he's going to sell it us at 10 times and then tell us precisionary is expensive. Actually, precisionary is cheap. So, this technology game is so complicated that you really have to go into the deeper aspects of it. But you have to, as I said, there's no more time. The technology bull has to be taken by the horns. Otherwise, the Indian military is going to be a military dependent on external supply chains, and see what happens, the humiliation that Europe is going through. We just have to get this right.
Mr. Kumar.
I think I'll just build on what General said, that I think every country has to become self-sufficient in the technology. It's not easy to part away with whatever you worked hard on and just give it away like that. So every country has to be self-sufficient, and I think India has done it very well when it comes to the mobile technology. India leapfrogged the world by not building the landline infrastructure. I think something like that India can proactively look at. So India is investing in the technology of which was 10 years current, and India can flip it. India can start actively invest in technology that is going to be coming up in 10 to 15 years from now. So two parallel track. One track is get this one going, but also have this I would say a national project sort of things where you are investing in something that is going to be the platform from 15 years from now. So I think so that is will be taking the technology horn by the bull if you do something like that.
But overall, you're seeing it as a positive thing.
It's a positive thing, but on the case by case basis, depends on the importance of the technology.
I guess one will have to live with that. Thank you so very much. And familiar with that, we have to close this particular episode. I think we've already overrun our time limit. Thank you, Dr. Bhattacharya, General Shukla, Mr. Kumar, for a really, I know I learned a lot, so I'm sure all our viewers will have a thing to say on that. I do hope you enjoyed this particular roundtable, and as I told you before, we are planning to have similar roundtables on this particular subject over the course of the year. Do stay tuned in to Stat News for that. Till we meet again, this is Ramananda Sengupta signing out.